today I'm very grateful to have as our special guest Mary Kruger. Mary has over 20 years of coaching, I can't say that, career consulting, curriculum development, and training experience. She's helped more than 1,200 people overcome the isolation, frustration, and discouragement job searching can bring, as many of us have probably found. Mary, thank you so much for being here with us today, and I'm just going to hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Terry, and thanks to CIBC for having me. I'm really excited to be doing this and a little nervous, I gotta say. Okay, so welcome to Job Search Q&A. Super excited to be doing this with everyone today, and thanks for being on the call. Feel free to ask questions in between, as well as we're going to have a question period at the end. And we've got some pre-submitted questions as well. But I'd like to always start out by saying there's no stupid questions out there. Often the question you might be thinking about, somebody else is as well. So please feel free to ask me anything. This is going to be your opportunity. So what I thought I'd do to start with is just a small presentation around the hidden job market and around a little bit around networking, just to give you kind of a touch of what I do. And before I do that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. Some of you are aware, and some of you aren't. And just a couple of more housekeeping things. If you can, turn off any distractions right now. Put your phone on vibrate. Put mine on it. Turn off social media notifications, that kind of thing. And have a notebook and or a laptop or something so you can make some notes if you want to. And yeah, as I said, bring those questions. So who am I? As Terry mentioned, I'm a certified career coach. I'm certified through the International Coaching Federation, and I've got more than 20 years experience in a combination of training, curriculum, facilitating, and job search, as well as the coaching. And I love being a coach. I actually started my company almost 9 years ago now. And it's been a wonderful opportunity. I'll tell you a little more about that. And I've helped more than 1,200 people in their job search, and so know a lot about it. I've made 3 major career transitions myself, so it's something I know well. I'm a mom. On probably my most proudest moments is that I have 2 wonderful daughters. Some of you know one of them, Jessica Kruger. She used to work for SCIBC, and she's on the call today to help support me. Thanks, Jess. And I'm a sailor, a bit of an adventurer, and of course, the business owner. So just a quick story how I ended up becoming a coach. 13 years ago now, Jessica was in a major accident and fainted 2 stories up on a ladder, painting for a company, and she broke her neck in 3 places. And when that happened, of course, as you can only imagine, some of you can exactly imagine, she sustained a spinal cord injury, and our life was totally changed around. A lot of different things happened during that time. And I devoted as much as I could to my daughter. I think being a mom is one of my first priorities and always has been. And so I was there, I was through her rehab, was able to be with her. It was a wonderful thing that I was able to at least help to be there and to support her. Fast forward about 4 years after that, her injury, Jessica was doing really well. She was in university and she had learned to drive. She was gaining back her independence in a new way. She was doing great. And me, I was still kind of living for Jess. And I ended up talking with a coach. And this coach said to me, "Can I be honest with you, Mary?" And I said, "Yeah, of course." And she said, "You need to take back your life." So this is kind of a weathered looking sign. If I look up, it's still in my office on my desk. And it was just kind of an epiphany. It was like, yeah, I'm still living for Jess and trying to be there and be all for her. And I really was not looking after me at all anymore. And so that was when I decided to go back to school, and I got my coaching certification, and I started my own company, MLK Coaching. And I haven't looked back since. It's one of the best things I could have ever done. And just a side note, for those of you that don't know my daughter, she's on with us today. Hi, Jess. And she's also doing fantastically. She has is engaged to be married next year, and she has her own thriving baking business called The Stubborn Baker. Those of you that are local might want to check her out, and super proud of her, of course. So yeah, pretty exciting. As you might guess, family is a really important piece to me. And here's the growing family. There's all of us. I'm now a grandma. Hate to admit it sometimes, but yeah, I have the gray hair to prove it. And on the right of Jessica is her fiance, Juan, and then my other daughter, Leah, on the far right, and her husband, John, and then that's her son, Zephyr, who was taken last year in the back of our house. So yeah, family is super important to me, and not only family, but here's the other piece of the family. This is synchronicity. So synchronicity is our sailboat. She took us around the world with both my daughters and my husband many years ago now. We still have her. In fact, we're planning our next trip. So stay tuned for that one. All right, so let's dig in. That was a little bit about me. And now let's look at who I work with. I work with people that are changing their careers, people that want to move up the corporate ladder or maybe something else within an organization, people that are re-entering the workforce, whether they were stay-at-home dads, stay-at-home moms, or were out of work due to injury or other things, maybe going back in. Also work with people that want to change the industry that they're currently in, or maybe they just want to change what they do using their transferable skills. So maybe they don't want to stay in the same role either. They want to look at a complete career transition. So those are other folks that I work with. So do you ever feel like you're on a bit of a roller coaster ride in your job search? Any nods? I see some smiles. Yeah. So you put in some application, maybe you get that interview, and then bang, you thought you nailed it, right? You thought, man, I got that job, and then you didn't. I'll never forget my older daughter, Leah. She had interviewed for a job when she was in university, and it was an accounting clerk position. It was an entry-level position. And the woman, after one interview, said to her, "We are 99.9% sure that you have the job." So we were so excited because it was her first kind of big grown-up job. And we went out and we bought her a new outfit to wear for the first week. And next week, she got a call back and she's like, the woman was like, "Sorry, we're not hiring you." And she never really did get an idea of what happened, whether they hired someone else or what happened, but huge disappointment. But that's how it can be, right? Do you ever feel like this? A bit like tearing your hair out? Yeah. Yeah, it can be pretty frustrating, right? Maybe just put in the chat box, what's if you are currently job searching or looking at changing your career, what's it feel like for you right now? Just type that out, or if you prefer, you can just unmute yourself. Here's going to take a look there.
Kevin says hot and cold.
Yeah.
I know for me it was just not feeling like I'm getting anywhere. Like I just feel stuck.
Yeah, kind of like in mud, right?
Yeah.
Actually, a client last week said exactly that to me. It felt like they were stuck in the mud.
Ryan says feels unsure, new brick wall. Jess says misunderstood.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of emotions in the range from really positive to not so positive to in between. And sometimes we can feel different emotions all in the same day, right? Just depending on what's happening. So, yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. All right. So how often do you wonder, what's the best job? Best way to find the job? How can I get ahead of the competition? Because there's so much competition out there. Where are the jobs? And are there better ways to apply for work other than through the job boards, through LinkedIn, through ads? And so these are some of the questions that you may be thinking about and some of the ones that I want to kind of address today. So put in the chat box, how are you currently looking for work?
So while people are typing in, I will say that usually it's like I'm I feel like I'm waiting for people to send me something that's right for me, or maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Kevin says virtual coffee dates and introductions, LinkedIn, easy apply.
Yep. Definitely.
So,
Okay.
oh, Philippa says LinkedIn, job boards, connections. And
Mm-hmm.
Ruth says networking, connecting with like minded people.
Okay. Yeah. Some great comments there. Thank you. I think that's mostly what I've got. So here's, a lot of different ways that we look: job boards, company websites, classified ads, probably more social media ads, website ads now than other things before, calls to employers, LinkedIn, unsolicited, right, contacts, to whether they're emails or on LinkedIn or other social media, lots of different ways. Most common, what I'm finding people are doing are generally the websites, right, or the job boards. So things like Glassdoor, Craigslist, Monster, Charity Village, Indeed. That's one of the most common ways I see people looking for work. One, because it's quick for the most part, and it's fair, relatively easy, and it's relatively safe, right? You just keep sending out applications, don't really have to talk to anybody too much unless you get an interview. Yeah, I'm seeing some nodding. Okay.
Kevin also said recruiters, although it
Yeah.
seems like they have way more candidates than jobs right now.
Yeah. Recruitment's an interesting one, actually. I'm just going to speak to that one for a minute, because recruiters or employment agencies, outplacement agencies, they work for the companies, not for you. And that's always important to remember, because I think it's a good piece to have in your job search, but too many people, what I've seen that have not been successful, have given too much time to that area. And Kevin's saying, there is a lot more candidates than there are recruiters. And yeah, the recruiters, that you may get work through them, but who pays the bill? Well, it's the companies. And so you want to kind of think of your time and proportionately work a small portion of that time talking with recruiters. I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it's a good idea to actually make sure you connect with them, for sure. But at the same time, it's important to only spend a small proportional amount of time doing that. So, yeah. Okay. So let me talk to you a little bit about what's called the hidden job market. So in the hidden job market, um, let's pretend that we've got an employee over here, and I blocked it off. I gotta move my thing again here. Okay, so we'll say this is employee Sam. So employee Sam has decided that he is going to give his notice on January 15th. And so, or he's thinking about giving his notice, I should say. And so he's going to spend some time thinking about it. Might take quite a bit of time. Hasn't really figured out the whole process yet. But then he's decided that, yes, he's going to give his notice. And he finally gets around to telling his manager on February 15th, so about a month later. This is just to give you an idea of how this works, okay? Then if it's a larger organization, or one that has an HR department, or maybe it's got one HR person, they may find out about the role in a couple of weeks after that. Because what may happen is the decision maker, the manager of the area, may decide to reevaluate the role. They may be looking at internal candidates. There may be people going away on holidays. I mean, I'm using February, but imagine if this is in the summer, for instance, in a normal summer. So yeah, that could take a couple of weeks as well. So say February 28th is when HR finds about it, human resources. It's also called people experience and people and culture. We got a lot of different names now for HR, but basically those are the people that start out with your applications. And then if it goes to a posting, whether it's an advertisement or they put a posting on their website, that could easily take at least another couple of weeks. Okay. So if we're looking at the hidden job market, the hidden job market is the jobs that are not advertised. So they're the ones that are not out there to the public. You haven't had an opportunity to see them on LinkedIn or anywhere else. So not many people know about them. That's actually when the best time is to apply for a role. So looking at this timeline, when do you think would be the best time to apply for the job at this ABC company? Anybody? You can just unmute yourself or type it in.
I'm just going to unmute because I can't type so fast. I think the probably right when he's put in his notice to his manager gives you that little wiggle room if you're good enough to get that interview with the manager.
Yes, absolutely, Ryan. Yeah, that's the perfect time to do it. Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts? Okay.
This is a bit cheeky, but I mean, you should probably already have contacted them before this person has given notice, like on their list of it. You know, if there ever was an opportunity, they were already thinking of you, of tapping you on the shoulder.
Yes, really valid point, Kevin. If you're doing your networking and you're connecting with the companies, organizations you really want to work for, then hopefully you already know about it. So in this example, we're not at that stage, but that's a really good point. But let's look at kind of how many applications they might get, okay? So this, again, is just a pure, simple illustration. Don't hold me to it because it's not always going to happen this way, but you know, employee gives his notice, maybe there's a couple people, and that might be someone that he's networked with that might then go after the job. Decision maker starting to contact people could be 3 to 6 people. Once the HR department starts to see it, you know, they may already have applications on file. So maybe 20 to 30, could be more, could be less. And then once it hits online or in some kind of form of advertisement on their website, 100, you could even add a 0 to that, right? It could even be 1,000 people. So just a quick story. So before I move to that next slide here, yeah. I was working with a CFO, Chief Financial Officer, and he was doing some networking, and he found out about this job from it was a past colleague of his he'd worked with in the past. He was at I can't remember what exactly it was, but some kind of pre-COVID, some kind of meeting. And when he was talking to this past colleague of his, the colleague said, "Oh, actually, I'm leaving, and this job is going to be available." And he was also in the finance area. And so Jim did actually apply and got the job. And what he found out was from this guy was that in the first hour they posted, they had 100 applications in 1 hour. Jim ended up getting the job because he connected with someone that was already there and that was actually leaving. So we can say, well, we don't really know when the right time is, and it's true, we don't. But there is a number of ways that we can find out about it. And just like Kevin illustrated, you know, if you're already starting to talk to people, you're planting, I'd say we plant the seeds, right? We're planting the seeds for when there is going to be opening. So these hidden market is the jobs that aren't advertised yet, but they are available. So there are openings there, and that can be up to 90% of the jobs. So here's some of the reasons why companies don't advertise. Could be around confidentiality, right? Around the job opening. Maybe they're going to be laying off the person who's got the role right now, and that's a key reason why they don't do it. Could be lack of money if we're talking maybe Facebook ads, or it's a very small company, for instance. They may not have an HR department, right? It may be the owner that is going through them. Or they may not want zillions of resumes. And as soon as you open it up into where they're advertised, whether online or wherever, you're getting lots of resumes. Think back to my little story, that company that the CFO was leaving, there was 100 resumes in the first hour. And it was listed on Craigslist, which blew my mind. That was kind of something that I had kind of a stereotype that Craigslist was very entry-level positions and nothing else. And in this case, that wasn't wasn't true because this was an executive position. So there you go. So yeah, that's just some of the reasons why. So employers hire people that approach them at the right time. I used to always say this in the job finding club that I was teaching, and you can go like, great, but when is the right time? We don't really know for sure, do we? Okay. But there is a way that we can do that. And I won't be able to go into this in a lot of depth today. In the course that I'm going to tell you a little bit about, I will. But what you're going to start to do is you're going to build a list of companies that you're interested in or organizations that you're interested in. So one of the things you want to do is you want to consider the type of industry that you want to work in. Maybe it's not the industry you're in now. And I know there's some questions around that I'm going to address in a bit. Decide what kind of company. Or size of company, I should say, you want to work for. Do you want to be in a small organization? Do you want a large corporate company? Are you looking at public? Are you looking at government, nonprofit? And then start to use resources to build your leads list. If you're local, Business in Vancouver is a great resource. It's got names of people. It talks about companies that are opening. Across Canada, there's like Calgary, Business in Calgary, Business in Alberta, and in the US, same thing. They have business journals, business directories, and things that can help you. Even watching the news at night, we see people on, right? We see the name of somebody like the Vancouver Cram right now, probably not a great time to apply, but you see they're talking, so you get their name from that, and then you can go from there and move forward. So this is just kind of just giving you a little taste of how to build that leads list. So it's a list of places that you're interested in targeting. And then looking at the best strategies to contact those decision makers. It could be networking. You'd be doing virtual networking. Lots of that is happening now. Calls to employers. That's something I cover in my program where you're doing cold calls or warm calls. It could be through your networking. You found out somebody works at the company that you can connect with, and they can connect you to the decision maker. Could be LinkedIn, and could be association meetings. Pretty much every type of work that is out there has some kind of association that is connected with it. My client today I was talking to just reached out to, it was an environmental renewable energy association. I don't have it quite right, but that's the gist of what it was. So there is, believe me, if you just type in association and industry, you're going to find it. And that can be really helpful as well. Okay, so I'm going to take just a couple minutes to talk a little bit about networking. Great way to find out about possible jobs, also just find out about connections that you can talk to. And there's a couple key things that we don't think about in networking. The first one is, the first sort of false thing out there is that you've got to network with the person or with the people that do the same thing as you. So you're a civil engineer, then you got to network with other engineers. Because people know people, right? Think about if any of you have read or know anything about 6 degrees from separation. I didn't get it quite right. We are all so close. And now with COVID-19, everything is becoming more and more virtual. It's actually, I think it's getting easier to connect with people. So the first thing about networking to know is network with everybody you come into contact with. Next thing is try giving back. With networking, you want to develop relationships with people. It could be something as simple as they're interested in climbing and you found a great article on MEC's opening up a big climbing area in the Okanagan. Could be something else. So you try to learn about the person a bit as well. And with social media, that's a lot easier to do than it used to be. And then be curious, ask questions, build the relationship. And then the next tip is to honor your word. And what I mean about that is if you say you're going to contact them, say to follow up after you've had an initial conversation with them, make sure you do it. That's important. And that's part of the honoring your word. Because if you're demonstrating that you are honoring your word, then you're going to do that in a job too. And those are all attributes that an employer wants to see. A few more. I've already mentioned about everyone being a contact. The other trick is to mention a couple companies you're interested in. So rather than do you know if they're hiring, we're going to talk about companies that you're interested in. And I'm going to show you a quick script on this as well. And then you'll be able to see it on the recording later too, because I'm going through it pretty quickly. So, and then finally, if you're doing networking and if you get a contact that knows someone in a company you're interested, ask if you can use their name. You know, would it be okay, Carol, if I used your name when I talked with Paul? And they may say no, most likely they'll say yes. And then right away, instead of being a cold call or contact, it becomes a warm one. So think about what's getting in the way of you networking. Here's just some of the reasons or ways it might be happening for you. You might just not believe networking works. Trust me, I work with a lot of people. Networking works. You might not know where to start, what the steps are to do networking, and that's okay. That's something that a coach, myself, I can help you with. Others can help you with. You might be unsure what exactly are the steps to network, or what do you say? Or you might have the mindset that if you're networking, you're bothering people. Anybody? Hands up. Anybody feel like they're bothering people if they're networking? Yeah, see one hand. Only one? Okay. Two? Yeah. Okay. There's those fears, our mindset, right? We call it the saboteur in coaching. Fear of looking stupid, fear of looking, I'm not enough, fear of the unknown, that I'm not saying the right thing, I'm not articulate enough. There's all of those as well, right? And or maybe you just don't know how to start or what to say. So here's a script that I recommend. Okay? I'm just going to fill in a name here. So, hi, Bob. I'm looking for work as a training manager, and I'd appreciate any ideas you might have about people to talk to or places to look. Do you notice I'm not saying, do you know if blah, blah, blah is hiring, right? People to talk to, places to look. And then you fill it in. I'm particularly interested in SCIBC and the federal government. Okay, so you're giving them some ideas, and the company names are really important because people don't think when you're networking with them about work, about company names. They think about, is a company hiring? And so they don't think about, oh, actually, I know somebody in Coca-Cola if you're in marketing and you're interested in that company, or I know somebody in the federal government that might be in an area that you're looking at. So that's another piece to the script that is really helpful.
Hey, Mary, can I ask a question about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm presuming that you're asking this person who maybe works in the field that you might be interested in or in a company, but you're not mentioning their company specifically. Maybe you're mentioning their like affiliated companies or competitors, or
it could be their company too, if you're targeting their company as well. And it doesn't have to be the same role that you're like, they don't have to be doing the same role you're doing, right? Like you don't have to network with another training manager, because especially that's where the two companies come in. Because say I'm not a training manager, but you're interested in working for, we'll use Mountain Equipment Co-op. I know somebody who works in Mountain Equipment Co-op because I work there. So that's where the names kind of come in as well. Does that answer your question, Jack?
Yeah, so you could just say, so-and-so who works at Mountain Equipment Co-op, I'm particularly interested in working for your company, or possibly Arc'teryx.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's right. Yeah, you want to work in outdoor retail areas, and those would be some of the areas that you could be in, for sure. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, so my last networking tip is follow up. So we use the script again, but then we make sure that we're kind of keeping that person accountable. We're saying, hey, I'm going to check back with you in a few weeks' time, just in case you come up with any ideas for me. Thank you. Because the person will be much more ready to sort of think about this when they know, oh, Mary's going to call back in a couple weeks. Mm-hmm. And this kind of brings us to why you need to be really organized in your job search and keeping track of what's going on, right? Who have I talked to? Who have I sent that message to? When do I need to follow up? All those kinds of things. Okay. I'm going to skip this in because of the time right now, and we're going to go to Q&A. This is one of my favorite buddies. This picture is, this is Rosemary. She is an orangutan in Borneo that we got to see when we sailed there. Kind of one of my favorites. I got her in our living room too. So. Okay, so Terry, we'll open it up to questions.
Okay, so we are going to go through the pre-submitted questions first. And then if you guys have any questions after that, you can just unmute yourselves. You should be able to do that and just ask any questions that you might have. So I have 13 pre-submitted questions. So hopefully it doesn't take too long to get through.
All right.
So any advice on changing careers specifically?
Good question. So changing careers, the first thing I'd be doing is I would be taking stock of your transferable skills. So, and if any of you are interested, if you send me an email, I'll send you my worksheet on transferable skills. And so, because our skills can transfer over into many different areas. So I'll give you an example from me. I was doing training and sales for the Bay. I worked for the Bay for 10 years. I was their assistant sales manager. And I was able to take that training and transfer it over into working for a nonprofit, and where I was actually teaching job search programs. Because I'd done facilitating, I'd trained employees, I could take that over and go there. And then from there, I actually moved and I managed a training program for Mountain Equipment Co-op. Again, because when I taught job finding clubs, I also learned to build curriculum. And I was very lucky in that I always had kind of someone who was mentoring me as well. And so then I was able to transfer my skills over there. So that would be one of the first things I would think about. Second thing is I'd hire a coach. And it's not just because I'm a coach, but because a coach can really look at things from, like high level, 50,000 foot level, and help to see the blind spots that you don't see. They also help with mindset, which is huge. We all have those negative thoughts. I'm not good enough. I'm too young. I'm too old. I don't have enough experience. Why would they hire me? It can go on and on. And so we really work with the mindset. And then the third thing is I would take a look at a lot of labor market information as well, and kind of see like where are the industries that are hiring right now, or that you think are hiring.
Thank you. Okay, in a post-COVID environment, what industries are looking for talent and actually hiring?
Okay, that's a good one. So the obvious one probably many people think about is health, right? Healthcare. So, but healthcare expands out into like manufacturing. So PPE, protective blah, 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 equipment.
Personal protective equipment.
Thank you. You got it. I should know it. My husband's in construction. Manufacturing, all those kinds of things, visors, masks, ventilators, all of that. Those types of companies for sure. Also into government, because government, think about all the supports that are coming out both in the US and Canada in terms of government. So there's all that infrastructure that needs to happen. So tech is really big right now. Now so many companies are going virtual. So that is a huge industry. And with tech comes customer service as well, right? So retail is changing. People may be laid off in retail, or they may be shifting, pivoting into online sales instead. So that can also be important. But the tech side for sure is a big one. Data centers are those things. Think about Zoom. I wish I had, I don't even know if Zoom's a public company, but if they are, I wish I had shares in Zoom right now. So everything is going online. So anybody that is supporting that is going to be a big one. Supply chain, delivery services, again, especially with online. Amazon has been hiring a ton of people. Call centers I mentioned already, and then financial, right? Because financial is a big part of all of what's happening. So when we think about industries, think of outside the box in terms of what the roles are. So for instance, when you think about medical products and services, or in health services, you're going to think like nurses, support, doctors. But then go back, think about lab assistants, think about people that are doing research right now for the virus, for instance. Tons of money is getting poured into research to find a cure. There's also all the data behind that. And then there's, if you're looking at like accounting, there's the financial side of it. So bigger organizations especially, they need to start to expand. The other thing that happens with industries is when we start to lay off, then we also start to hire, because companies will get to the place where they may have laid off too many people, or they're reorging, and then they're going to hire other people back. So that's also something. So when you hear like, oh yeah, don't work for that company, they just laid off a bunch of people, that might be the case, but they may be bringing more people back in or reorging. One example is like even just promotions. So think about when we think about the hidden job market, there's always these other openings, right? So because people leave, people change jobs, sadly people die, people move away, they go on a sabbatical. So there's always movement within organizations, right? And so that's a big part of it as well. And then the other one that a lot of people don't really even think about, or two others, training, because think about all the educators that have now got to be able to take their materials and go virtual, like the school teachers, for instance, professors. I think there's a big market in consulting and training. And then pets, because how many people have puppies now, right? Or they're just spending a lot more time with their pets. So I think pet industry was growing before COVID, and I think it's going to keep on growing.
Thank you. All right, next, how do you grow and maintain networks with social distancing?
That's a good question. So it is similar, I think, to regular networking. I think what you want to do is you want to identify people that you want to network with. And I would start with the easy or the low-hanging fruit. I would look at the places you used to work. And, you can just even type in on LinkedIn the company plus the location, and up will come a lot of names on the search function. And start and connect with those people. And just like I said, whether it's virtual networking or in-person networking, you want to build a relationship with that person. It's a two-way street. So it's not all about what can they give you, but it's also got to be about how you can help them. So I think that's a big piece to remember. And then that follow-up, just keep in touch with people. So yeah, you're going to be using LinkedIn, especially if you're looking for work or you're wanting to change positions. That's probably going to be your biggest place. But don't discount some of the others as well, because sometimes Facebook can be helpful. Set up those, make an initial contact and then set up a virtual chat, whether it's on Zoom or on Skype. And with the good weather, if you're in a place where you can be outside, you may in fact be able to have a conversation with somebody in person. It may look a little different than it did before, but you might be able to get on a patio on a sunny day. And again, just honoring those other people's comfort levels, because with COVID-19, everybody's in a different place where their comfort is. But if they're open to meeting and having whether it's a coffee or a beer, depending on who it is, then that's a great way to do it too.
Awesome. I'm not very happy to take, I'm very happy to take a smaller role than my last to get work. Mm-hmm. How do I tell, or how do you tell that to employers and not seem like a flight risk?
Yeah, I think if you are applying for the job, we call it dummy down the resume. So what we do is you lower some of the level on the resume. And so I had a CFO that wanted to apply for roles as more like a director of finance or even a controller role. So a couple steps down. And so what we did was we were able to kind of modify some of the titles so that they weren't CFO this, CFO that. Keeping honest, but at the same time, not kind of like so blindly everything says CFO. The other thing is, even if you do have CFO on your resume and you're applying for, let's call it a director of finance role, what you want to do is you want to assure the person why you're doing it. Like sometimes if you can anticipate the questions, even if they don't get asked, that's going to help you, because you could get screened out during the interview because of their concerns. So if you take that example, for instance, you could say, you know, previously I was working as a CFO in my last role. However, I'm now in the position in my career that I'm looking for something that is not quite so stressful. And I'm looking for more, I'm working for more work-life balance. Maybe you've just started a new family or you're going to start a family. And so this is what I'm looking for. And then you want to reassure them you're sticking around. Because that's one of the other things they're going to be thinking about is he going to stay or is he going to be at that flight risk and he's going to take off? So reassuring and say, you know, I'm looking for a stable role and company that I can grow, or maybe not grow with, but that I can stay with and I can contribute to for, you know, at least the next few years. So that reassurance.
Jess has her hand up. Jess, do you want to ask or say something here?
So what if you're planning to move on shortly? What if this is just a transitionary job for you?
That's a good question. I think it really comes down to how you feel, how comfortable you feel. And it depends on how soon you're going to move on. If it's a permanent position, you know, I'm not sure I would disclose that much information. If I plan to stay with an employer for like the next year, I probably would just say, you know, I'm planning to stay for you know, at least a year and then see what happens after that. If it's a contract position, then that kind of gives it there right away. I actually recall I had a woman in one of my classes and she was 63 and she thought she was going to have a really hard time finding work. And when she got work, she said, you know, I'm planning to retire at 65. And the employer hired her and said, I want to get the best last 2 years of work. And this is the person I want for the role. They knew in 2 years they were going to have to fill it again. Are you thinking a certain time, Jess, or that you would be in a role, or?
Well, I'm just thinking, I have a friend specifically that's looking for work right now. And he is overqualified for most of the jobs that he's applying for right now.
Right.
And ultimately, he knows that it's just going to be like a transitionary job until, because his skill set is quite niche, he doesn't think he's going to find exactly what he's looking for right now, but is willing to accept something he's overqualified for sort of in the meantime.
Yeah, I think I would just stay away from the timeline. And I would just say, you know, I'm really excited to be working here. I wanted to try something new, or I wanted to have some exposure to a different industry. And so I'm excited to be here, and then just focus on his strengths.
Right. And if they specifically ask you?
If they specifically asked you, that's a good question. I don't know, because I would probably try to be as honest as I could, but just say I'll be here. Yeah, I don't know actually. Ruth, have you got any? You've got an HR background. Do you have any thoughts on that? You have to unmute yourself.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question, please? Or could I just?
Yeah, I was just saying if somebody wants, it's kind of a short-term job and they're asked how long they're going to stay and they don't plan on staying very long. Do you have any suggestions on that?
Well, you know what? First of all, I appreciate the honesty, and I would mention that to them, like, thank you very much for your honesty. And I would indicate, sometimes there is that opportunity just for short term, and sometimes there's not. So I'd be, again, very honest and say, you know what, this is a permanent, we're looking for long-term commitment. Yeah, I think honesty is the best way to go with that in both ways. I mean, I think they're sharing that they're short term, and sometimes there just isn't that short term in terms of what the company's looking to invest, I guess, in terms of training, what the job skills or what it requires. So and then maybe even if you know of someone that's looking for someone that short term, be sure to tell them, say, you know what, I know of someone though. I'd be open that way as well. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you know, sometimes you don't, but anyway, I don't know if that helps, but
yeah, no, for sure. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, I think what you might want to recommend to your friend Jess is to look at contract work as well.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so like some temporary work, or even that temp agency is another one, because that's a great opportunity where you don't have to commit to a long time. And I don't know, I mean, out of integrity, I think for myself, I would probably be honest, or at least I would try to avoid the question if it's not asked, not offer the information. But then if they asked you directly, then I would probably, excuse me, say, yeah, I'm planning to stay for 6 months. I mean, sometimes you don't even know, right? Because that niche job may take longer than 6 months to come, and you don't want to limit your opportunities either. So you need to be kind of careful there. Does that help?
Yeah. I think you've got 10 more questions and 8 minutes to get through them. So
I can talk fast.
Also, Philippa's thoughts were, I think honesty is the best way to go while reiterating your commitment in the meantime. So,
yes. Thanks, Philippa.
yeah.
Nice to have you on the call.
How do you build a search around a newly discovered disability?
That's a really good question. I think, first of all, I'd be looking at, is the disability have any impact on what the role is you're going to be doing? So if you can continue to do what you were doing previous to your disability, I don't know what the disability is, I would say then just conduct your job search like any other time. However, if the disability is going to impact you, you're not going to be able to do what you were doing previously, then I would go back to those transferable skills and start to look at what your strengths are, work with a career coach, and identify the different things that you can offer to an employer, and then go from there.
Awesome. Are employers accepting? Are they scared to hire someone with a disability?
I think employers are accepting. And what I've always said is if they're not accepting, then maybe that's not where you want to work, right? You want to work with an organization that's going to align with your values. And maybe, I mean, I don't have a disability, so maybe I'm not speaking right from that. But I do believe you want to be in an organization that is going to fit with your values, who you are, and feel comfortable there. So, and there's a lot of research out there that says people with disabilities, they work a lot harder than people that don't have disabilities. They're usually more on time, and they're great employees. And I think most employers are recognizing that. And if they're not, then I'm thinking like maybe it's time to look somewhere else.
Thank you. So job searching with an injury that's progressing, with the knowing and unknowing, how far do we push?
So how far do we push in terms of?
Well, like when I read it, I think it didn't really finish, but I'm thinking ourselves, like how far do we push ourselves is what I was thinking when I was reading that. I'm not sure if that question came from any of the attendees. So if you're happy to unmute yourself, if it did, then you can.
Actually, that one came from me, and yes, I didn't finish it. So sorry. I guess a lot of this stuff's getting answered as we go through it, but I guess when you're doing a job search and you have, I'm going to use myself for an example. I know I have an injury that's progressing, and it will get worse over time, which is going to restrict ability. So my example is my past experience was I cleaned up derailments, national emergencies, and my physical was as much as part as the other part to try to get to do what I had to do. I guess what I'm looking at is the question is that how do we, it's a hard question for me to answer, is how do we structure our job search, and how far do we push ourselves to fit into something, knowing, so if we accept something now that we can do now, how do you kind of gauge yourself knowing forward that you may not be able to continue to do this in 3 to 5 years? I guess that was the question in a nutshell. Sorry it took so much.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the elaboration, Brian. And that's a tough question, because we don't even know really, like physically with our bodies, what you will be like in 3 to 5 years, right? So sometimes I think we play the what if game too much, and that may not even come to fruition. So one of the things I would be doing is looking at an organization to see, like, are there other roles that I could transition into if you really like that organization, right? And then if that's the case, start to build some of that skill set. So for instance, if you're, it's a role that you're out in the field, you need to be active for, and you know that, say in 5 years, I don't know your disability, but maybe you're gonna end up being in a chair. then look at like, what are some other options? Could I be working in operations? Could I be doing something with the computers or managing a team remotely or something like that? And look at to see is the organization got other roles that you might be interested in, and maybe start to just do some soul searching. Like maybe is there something else that you want to be doing, right?
Well, that's kind of where I'm at, and yeah, I'm not at the point that I can be in the field anymore. So that was part of my question. Is yeah, and that's part of some of the stuff you've already answered. Is where to start looking to do a lot of this. So thank you, and thank you for giving you your best answer on that.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome.
All right, so how do we take all the skills that we have and pool them to find a new direction? So, and that was passion versus purpose.
Okay. So again, I go back to those transferable skills and what your strengths are, both so your hard skills, your education, your background, and then also your soft skills. And then I'd also look at, and I haven't talked about this today, is your personal values. Like our values are part of who we are, what we do. And if you send me an email, I have an ebook. It's my first ebook I ever did around values, and I'm happy to send it to you. And look to find an organization that meets with those values, and then and your passions. And then from there, you know, if you're shifting industries, for instance, you can talk about what you've learned in a past role and how that can help you in a new role. Because you may have to do a little bit of convincing with an employer if you're shifting or pivoting from one industry to another, but it's certainly doable for sure. I mean, I've made 3 career transitions, all with my transferable skills.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
How do you change your boss's perception of your skill set when it's beyond the scope of your position? So you're told it's not your role.
That is a very tough one. It's pretty hard to change somebody's mind. The only thing I could say to that is to find out like whatever the skill set is that you want to be moving into, or the role you want to move into. I'm assuming that you've got a skill set, maybe you have some gaps in it, you want to shift to another role, and your boss doesn't think you're going to be able to do that. Look for volunteer opportunities. Like maybe there's some committees you could go on to, or you could organize something or volunteer for something else that he or she might see that will actually, you know, kind of trite, but proof in the pudding, like that you're actually demonstrating those skills to that person. In the end, sometimes when we change ourselves more and we become confident in what we're doing, then it actually, that person will see it as well. But if they're set in what they see, you may or may not be able to do that. Otherwise, I would say look for other opportunities in the organization. Maybe there's another department if it's a big enough company that you could work in. And I would start to build that skill set. Even if they don't believe you can do it, if you believe you can do it, then that's what matters, right? It's that mindset piece again. If you believe and conceive, you will achieve. That's another one of my favorite sayings, because what we believe and we put forward is what can happen.
So question on writing, updating your resume with, or CV with outdated skills and experience, or looking for something completely different?
I'm not quite sure what the question is there.
I think it's just if you're updating, or maybe like you have, well, I think for myself, I don't know if this came from anyone on here, if you want to elaborate. I don't like to put my own judgment on questions, but I know I was a stay-at-home mom for a number of years, and then I tried to get back into the workforce, and I had this like 5-year gap, right?
Right.
So how do you sort of, I guess, write your resume so that it's not so obvious, maybe?
Yeah. Actually, in that case, I would make it obvious. I would actually put it as a separate category. Page 2, later in the resume, say something like other information, and then have the dates and say provided parenting or childcare or something to my son, and those dates. So I spent 4 years with my family. We sailed around the world. I have a separate section that actually gives those dates and says that I was circumnavigating on a boat at that time, just so that you've got it. Another example of that is if you have taken a job that wasn't within the type of work you normally do, then I usually have people, if we can't fill it in by using just years, sometimes you can use years instead of months to cover gaps. But if you've got a significant gap, then I usually put relevant work history and other work history, and then the other work history would come onto the second page. Then you would have your other jobs, because sometimes we have to take a job to feed ourselves, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. It shows that we can transfer our skills, that we're quick on our feet, that we'll do what needs to happen, and we're determined. So I would still cover off some of that information, because the thing is, if a resume is going to somebody without you talking to them first, they're going to screen looking at the gaps. That's another reason why networking and contacting employers first before any postings works much better.
Awesome. And sort of in relation to that, also thinking about sort of any outdated experiences that you might have. Like, I think, I'm 50 years old. I went to college after university and got like a job as a receptionist, but that has a lot of transferable skills, right?
Yeah.
But is it really, do I add that to my resume now? I mean, is it, how do you write that in?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and there's a trick to that. And what I use is the heading prior to. So I would say, like, if you're going back 10 to 15 years, say prior to 2005, and then you would list a role without the dates. So they don't really know when it happened. They just know it was before 2005, but then you show like a couple of points on it, because if it's, like you said, transferable skills that you want to show that are going to be important in the next job that you want, that's a good way to do it without having to date yourself.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. And then just how to, when to, or even whether to disclose disability during a job search.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the first thing to remember with that one is it is completely personal. So I actually asked Jessica about this question as well. And then I reached out and did a bit of research too on it. And it is very personal to who you are. So there's whether you disclose it at all, and then there is when to disclose it. So whether you disclose it, if it is a visible disability, just I'm going to use you as an example. Jessica's in a wheelchair. She's a quadriplegic. When she goes into an interview, somebody's going to see that. Not to mention, she needs to make sure that company business is accessible. So she's probably going to have to let people know ahead of time. And she could do it simply by saying something like, understand my interview's at this address. Is that location accessible? I'm in a chair, right? A wheelchair. And just to confirm that accessibility. Or if it's on the second floor, is there an elevator? Because if it's an older building and there isn't one, you don't want to show up there and then find out you can't get in. The other thing too is, in terms of accessibility, I've learned with having a daughter in a chair that accessibility to one person and to another person is totally different. So someone that isn't used to someone with in a wheelchair might think their organization is accessible, and you get there and there's like 2 steps. And they're like, well, it's only 2 steps. Well, I don't have to say, if you're in a wheelchair, 2 steps is 2 steps too much. So if it's a visible disability, you want to think about that if you're going to be going in person. When you share that information, or if you share it all, say you have an invisible disability, again, it's really very personal as to when you do it, or if you do it all. There's some pros and some cons. The risk to disclosing is its privacy, right? Especially if you have an invisible disability, they wouldn't know. So for instance, say you have, it's gone out of my head. It's a learning disability. Shoot. Gone out of my head.
Like dyslexia or something like that?
Yeah, it could be something like dyslexia.
Yeah.
And then maybe it does affect your job. So there's the privacy of that. And there is the risk of telling people that you have that disability, and it may or may not go against you. Again, I always say if you don't end up getting the job, and the main part was with the disability, maybe that's not somewhere you want to work anyway. And the employer, if you disclose it, the risk is they also may be focused on the disability. But then the benefits are you are open to accommodations as well. So if we go back to a physical disability, there's something called the law of accommodation, and companies are responsible to provide a certain amount within reasonable amount. And reasonable is a big term of accommodation. As well, there's organizations out there that can be helpful and also supply funding for accommodation. So that's also part of it. That is something, if you don't disclose your disability and you do need some kind of accommodation, maybe you need some kind of tool to use. Maybe the voice to text, for instance, if you've got arthritis in your hands or something like that. So any kind of supports or adoptions are not easily made if you don't self-disclose. But again, it really does depend on, it's a very personal decision for each person and what kind of disability they have, if it's invisible or visible, and where they go from there. The big thing here, I think, to remember is to be stressing that your strengths, right? Stress what it is you have to offer the organization. And if you don't feel it's a barrier, then that's going to come across to the employer as well.
Thanks. Kevin has a question in the chat there regarding job clubs. So what's your recommendation? Are we able to band together with fellow peers who are seeking jobs, or would you recommend a formal job club, like a paid one?
Well, I'm a real fan of job clubs because I spent 7 years teaching them, as well as I trained the facilitators for them. And my program is actually built on the job search model. So I think job finding clubs are great because they give you the support of the group, and it's also good opportunities for networking with other people. It's the luck of the draw what the group is like. I can tell you I have some groups I still remember, like 16 years ago, and other groups that I might remember for the wrong reasons. So it really does depend on what they are. I'm not really sure what they have for job finding clubs now. The federal government used to fund them, and then the other government, provincial government. So I don't know what is out there, but definitely worth looking at. Work BC would be the place to check in with for that. And in terms of the folks that have disabilities, Neil Squire has got some great employment programs as well.
Thanks. Okay, Mary, I only have 3 questions left, but I'm going to get you to finish up, and then because we want to get to the contest, I think, and then maybe I can ask you the 3 questions just for the recording at the end, maybe.
Definitely. Okay. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about the program that I'm launching. It's called Fast Track Your Job Search. It's the Complete Job Search Toolkit, and it is a 6-week program. And here's what the modules look like. So we do a lot of work around the values and beliefs. We look at networking and follow-up. Tapping into the hidden job market today was just a little piece of that. Also take a look at your whole professional marketing package. So that's your resume, your cover letter, references, informational interviews. They are my favorite subject. That is how I made my 3 career transitions, was through information interviews. That's the opportunity for you to interview the employers versus them interviewing you. And great way to network as well, and to tap into that hidden job market. And then the final module that is in the program is called Rocking the Employment Interviews, and also has follow-up with it. This is done in 6 weeks of group calls. It's a group program, a maximum 15 people within our group. And then we also will have many emails during the week that have different materials and things. And then for further support, I also will have a private Facebook group where you can put in your questions during the week. Say you're up and down on that roller coaster of job search, and so you want a chance to prep before an interview. You just need some help there or some support. So that's also all part of the program. And so it's $497 for the program. And then there is follow-up as well for 3 months afterwards. If you need help, you can be posting questions in the Facebook program, or sorry, Facebook group as well. And that's also part of the piece of it. So there's the link, and Terry's going to put the link in the chat box as well. There is still room in it. And it's based on my 7 years teaching job finding clubs. I use a lot of the material from that, and I built all my worksheet. I've got worksheets, checklists, scripts that I use. We talk about LinkedIn too, because it's such a big piece of it. So it's based on that, as well as I've done a lot of curriculum development. So that's also part of the program. So that's it from me. So thank you all for listening. And
Mary, if you have like a couple more minutes, I'm just going to run through the last three. And actually, Ruth, you might be able to help with this one too. So one of the questions was a review of people, or someone was asking for a review of people's rights during the job search. So what questions can and can't be asked in an interview?
Yeah, I actually wrote a blog post on that. So if you go to my website and go into the blog section, you have to go back a little ways. There's one on interview questions that employers can and can't ask. The first thing is, some employers will ask those questions purely out of ignorance, because think of the small employers that don't have an HR department. They're not informed. They haven't gone to school. They don't understand necessarily the rights. So some people may ask that because they just don't really know. I didn't mean to be rude by saying ignorance, but they simply don't know. They can't ask those questions like, are you married, or, some of those kinds of things. The other thing is the Canadian Human Rights Commission actually lists all the different things that can't be asked. I won't be able to give you all of them on the top of my head, but I can give you some of them. Age, gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, disability. Ruth, can you think of any others? That's 5.
No, I think you're right on there, Mary. Like yeah.
I think that's most of them. Yeah. But yeah, if you Google Canadian Human Rights Commission, and in this, it's the ARC, ARC. They are both part of advocating for people that feel that their rights have been violated, or that someone has asked an inappropriate question. What to do with those questions, because that's also kind of part of this. Again, it's really personal. It's like, when or do you disclose about your disability? If you feel comfortable answering the questions, then I say go ahead and answer it. If you don't, you don't have to. You could use something like, could you tell me how that applies to this role? So for instance, if somebody said to someone that was in, I don't know, say they were mid-20s to 30, and they said to them, are you planning to have any kids soon? You're not really supposed to ask that. And you could say, could you please tell me how that's going to apply to this role? It could be that employer actually worked for one that this happened. She didn't ask that question, but she had like 5 people pregnant all at the same time. Well, that's pretty brutal on the workforce. So that's the concern they have. So if you anticipate, and one of my tips is always think about, why does the employer ask this question? So in that case, they may really not be familiar with the Human Rights Act, and they may ask it because they don't know, but also it may be because they have some concerns that person in front of them is then going to go on maternity leave soon as well, or paternity leave.
So the next question is, how do you frame our disability as a positive, or how do you showcase what we have learned and can do better because of our disabilities?
Yeah, you prepare for the interviews and things with that, right? Like, think about, what is it that's changed you? I think of my daughter, Jessica, like tenacity, determination, strength, ability to change, and to talk about pivot, when one day you're walking and the next day you're not. Those are all attributes that you have, and that's with a physical disability, and only because that's my experience with it. But I think you have to think about, what can you offer? It doesn't matter whether you have a disability, invisible or visible or not. It's about talking about what your strengths are, what your experience is, what do you have to offer to the company, and also why are you interested in working there? Employers hire people that want to work for them. So stress, what is it about blank company that has got you? Like, why are you inspired to even want to work in that organization? And that's going to take over from the disability. If you believe your disability is a problem, trust me, that's going to be what's going to be said to the employer. But if you look at what you have and like what you've been through, the journeys that you've had because of your disabilities, I mean, that's huge. Like, who wouldn't want an employee that has been able to overcome some of that adversity and, you know, change and adapt? You can put that, talk about transferable skills, look at how you can adapt and change within a workplace.
Cool. Okay, last one. We made it. All right. And so basically, just the question is maybe if you could discuss what you feel has changed in the job search process because of COVID.
Well, I mean, I think the big one is the networking, and we're not seeing the big networking, you know, groups, committees, organizations going right now because we can't have the bigger numbers. That's one of the big things. Retail's definitely changed. But having said that, people with retail skills have great transferable skills. I actually reshared a really good article on LinkedIn. And I've never seen this much interest. I've added a little bit of what I had to say, but the article was somebody else's that I shared and ended up with 5,000 people liked or viewed, sorry, I should say, this post. So things are definitely changing in different industries. And so I think it's like upskill, look at your skills. Is there something that you need to update? Definitely with COVID, if you aren't computer literate, you better get computer literate and upgrade your computer skills because you're going to need it if nothing but for that first Zoom call or Zoom interview. And then prepare. Especially like that's one of the big things that's changed is, you know, you're going to probably have some virtual interviews. And then you may have, you know, I know people, clients I've had that have in-person interviews as well. They're still happening, but they don't happen right away. You're definitely going to probably have a virtual one first. So prepare, practice in front of the screen, get a friend to do, if it's Zoom or Skype with you, or find out what they're going to use. If you're having an interview, maybe they're going to use something else. They might use WebEx. There's a lot of different screen sharing webinar type things. So make sure you're comfortable with the technology, practice. Also make sure the background looks okay. You know, you check and see what's behind you, that kind of thing, or blur it. You can do that as well. Yeah, and otherwise you're going to prepare quite similar to what you would do in person. You probably have to kind of enunciate a little bit more just because you're not right in front of someone. But I think practicing with a friend, or a loved one, that's really going to help for sure. I think that answers it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Just last call for any last comments or questions, feedback. Anybody?
Thank you, Mary. Everything was excellent. Thanks. Lots to chew on. And you will get an email from me. I do need that, something about transferable skills. Thank you.
Okay. My
that was
pleasure.
awesome. Thanks, everyone.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. It was great just to for you to go through all that. It was a lot to fit into an hour, but I think also the questions and your responses added a lot of color to everything. So I took a whole page of notes here on things too.
Great.
So yeah.
Glad to have you, Kevin.
Yeah.
Awesome. And nice to see everybody. Thank you, Ruth. Ruth said, thank you for the excellent, engaging, and learning opportunity. Great to interact and meet everyone. Have a wonderful summer. So thank you, you too, Ruth. Thanks everybody for attending. And thank you so much, Mary. So appreciate you taking the time with us today. And
my pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for hosting me. It was great.
No worries. All right. Have a great one, everybody.
Bye, everyone.